All right, welcome to the Snyder Report. I am your host, Gary Snyder. My guest today is Fred Redmond. He is the Secretary Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. Fred, welcome. Did I get that right, by the way?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thanks, Gary. Glad to be with you.
You know, the worst part is when I have a name I can't pronounce, and then I just screw that all up. But Fred and Redmond is pretty easy, especially for someone like me. Fred, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's not a good day for workers, but I'm doing
It's
good.
not.
Doing good, Gary.
Well, as we get started here, how we're in the day one of this shutdown, and you mentioned not a good day for workers. How is this shutdown affecting your workers that are part of the AFL-CIO?
Well, Gary, because of the Trump, we refer to this as a lockout. Because of the Trump lockout, 750,000 federal workers will be put on leave and will be forced to work without pay. And the administration has threatened to illegally fire thousands of workers if the government runs out of funding. And without a funding agreement, there will be more than 170 million Americans facing a health care crisis with a cost spike. And look, this is a crisis of the administration's making. So, it's a tough day for workers, Gary, because federal workers are not political pawns. And as far as the labor movement is concerned, we have a clear and precise message. We want to stop this Trump lockout. We want to fund the government. We want to fix the healthcare crisis. And we hope that our legislators in this administration will put working people first.
You know, as we look back over the first 10 months of the Trump administration, you talk about putting workers first.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear that is necessarily the case in the first 10 months of this administration.
No, it's not. Look, this administration has been holding our country, workers across this country hostage, and it's evident because he would rather shut down the government than address the mounting healthcare crisis that's going to affect not just workers, but it's going to affect families and communities around this country. And look, this administration has attacked federal workers time and time again. They've been fired, rehired, and fired again. They've been stripped of their collective bargaining rights and their union contracts. And now Russell Voigt, the Project 2025 author, who now is managing the Office of Management and Budget, is threatening to use a shutdown to illegally fire even more federal workers after months of chaotic firings and rehiring. So, look, this has been the worst attack on workers that I have seen in my lifetime that the labor movement have ever experienced. And when we think about the workers that's being affected, these are the people who care for our veterans, deliver social service checks on time, keep our food and water safe, and protect us at airports and during natural disasters, and the people that have been hurt by this administration's political games. Look, they are not politicians in Washington, D.C., as some people think. More than 80% of federal workers live outside of Washington, D.C. These are our neighbors. These are the people we go to church with. These are the people that our children go to school with. These are TSA agents. These are people that work for housing and urban development. These are people that work for government affairs. So we have seen a severe attack on the working class, on workers throughout this country by this administration. And as I stated, it's the worst that we've seen in our lifetime, and especially during the history of the labor movement.
When you take a look at why this shutdown happened, you have $1 trillion coming out of healthcare for workers and for Americans going literally for tax cuts for billionaires.
Yeah.
What's your message on that?
Well, it's coming at a time when working people are already struggling to pay their bills, and the Trump administration is offering no relief. And then with these radical healthcare spikes that we're going to be seen, all in the name of giving more tax breaks to billionaires, then I think it's an indictment on this administration. It's an indictment on our legislators in Washington, D.C. And what we are seeing is really an attack on our overall democracy. We're seeing attacks on, our way of life, where we don't expect the government to take care of us, but we expect the government to be there when we need the government. And these attacks have not only affect just union members, it affect our communities throughout this country. And, what we are seeing is the deterioration of this democracy that we have lived under for the last 250 years. So this is this president has a different agenda than the American people. And we got to continue to hang in there and fight back any way that we can.
Fred, you've spent over 50 years in the labor movement, starting from the shop floor at Reynolds Metals to the AFL-CIO's second highest office. What changes have you seen, and what changes haven't you seen in the fight for worker dignity?
Well, I've seen, and that's a good question, Gary. I've seen a lot of changes when it comes to workers' dignity and workers' self-respect. We see income inequality, where now we see, when I first got involved in this movement, the average CEO pay was something like, 25 times the pay of its employees. Now it's 275,000 times. And I mean, the price of income inequality has just went rampant. Workers are working harder and making less. And throughout my career, I've always known workers to just ask for a simple proposition, to share in the wealth that they help to create. And that is becoming more and more difficult now as we see this rising cost and income inequality takes place throughout our country. Now, the good news is we have, through collective bargaining, we have been able to continue our fight for good wages, for good benefits, even though our wages are not comparable with what they should be. The labor movement has fought for pensions. We have fought for health care for workers throughout this country, and we continue to grow. The labor movement in this country, when it comes to favorability ratings, rate 20% higher than both of the political parties. And another statistic that's very enlightening is the fact that 82% of the American people support organized labor, support unions and what we do. And that number rises to 90% for workers under the age of 35. So, we have seen a tremendous amount of changes, but we have also seen a shift where people understand that the labor movement, against all of this income inequality, all of this attacks to workers, we are the movement that's fighting for workers, people who go to work every day, play by the rules, pay their taxes. We are their voice. We are the ones that's out there fighting. And the polling that's taking place shows that the labor movement's favorability ratings are through the roof.
One more question before we hit a quick break. You've led efforts to combat economic inequality and racial injustice to your career. How do you see those struggles intersecting in today's labor landscape?
Well, I think that the labor movement had came a long way. Today's labor movement through the AFL-CIO, which is the House of Labor, we have we have 68. I'm sorry, that number changes. We have 68 affiliate unions that's members of the AFL-CIO and over 15 million workers. And this labor movement is being led by a woman, Leah Schuler, a dynamic lady who grew up in the labor movement. She came up as an organizer and is being led by, and the second person is me, an African American. And a reporter asked me, Gary, after our last convention when me and President Schuler was unanimously elected, what's the story here? What did this mean? And what it means is that the labor movement embraced and elected as its leaders for the first time a woman and an African American. So they elected the two best qualified people, and regardless to their race and their sex. And that says tons for the labor movement. That the labor movement has progressed, where today We have more people of color, more women in leadership positions at international union positions and also in local unions positions around this country. And this shows that people are turning to the labor movement, particularly those people who feel that, you know, they have been disenfranchised, disinherited, despised throughout history, are turning to the labor movement to participate in collective bargaining and get that shot at this so-called American dream. So the labor movement came a long way. We got a lot of work to do. Our labor movement is more diverse than it ever has been, and we continue to make room for young people, for women, for people of color throughout this movement.
And this is where I think our sponsor, one of your members, AFT Indiana, as one of our sponsors. So thank you to them.
Okay.
Fred, can you hold through a quick break?
Sure.
You're listening to the Snyder Report with Gary Snyder. We'll be right back.
Fort Wayne's National Award-winning Top Haunt to open now through the first weekend of November with Blackout the last weekend, but you will save time and money buying the RSVP timed tickets online. Hysterium.com.
All right, this is the part of the Snyder Report where we thank our sponsors, and we have a growing list. So let's start with Robin Winston. Robin has been there when we first sent out our first email, 147 subscribers. We're now over 108,000. So thank you, Robin Winston, and helping us get the podcast going in the right direction. Next up is our good friend, former Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. Her book, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. Get that anywhere you buy your books. Also, former two-term governor, two-term U.S. Senator Evan Bayh. Evan has been a sponsor of the newsletter, now jumps on board with the podcast. Congressman Andre Carson. Congressman Carson has been there from the start. We're glad to have him over here on the newsletter now. He needs your help to win re-election next year. So make sure you support Congressman Carson. Next up, State Representative Cherish Pryor. Cherish has been there from the start on the newsletter, joining us on the podcast now. So is State Senator Greg Taylor. I want to thank Senator Taylor for all of his support through the years. Next, we have a couple of new sponsors. First up is Indiana Citizen. You want to check out their new project, One Heartbeat Away. Do Christian nationalists have an agenda for Indiana? You know, all you have to do is look at the lieutenant governorship and you can see right away that they do. So thank you, Indiana Citizen. Next up is Jump Laundry. You can visit them at jumplaundry.com. They have home pickup. They do your dry cleaning, wash and fold with, I might add, no judgments, and next day service. So if you're in a crunch for time, you don't want to do your own laundry, get a hold of Jump Laundry at jumplaundry.com or at 317-740-5011. And they will take care of all of your laundry needs.
Washington politicians came to Indiana to get us to cheat and redraw our legislative maps. They want you to spend millions so they can rig the system and silence your voice. Hoosiers play fair. We don't need their meddling. We need our elected officials focusing on what we need most, making our lives better, lowering taxes, and bringing down the cost of energy and groceries. So tell your legislators, don't let Washington insiders rig our elections. Solve real problems and earn our votes.
Welcome back to the Snyder Report. I am your host, Gary Snyder. Today we are speaking with Fred Redmond. He is the Secretary Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. Fred, we were talking just before the break. Let me ask you this. Union membership is rising, especially among younger and more diverse workers. What's driving this resurgence, and how's the AFL-CIO adapting to meet that resurgence?
Yeah, well, what's driving the resurgence, Gary, is, workers are turning to collective bargaining with the rise of income inequality and with CEOs taking more and more and the workers getting less and less. More and more workers in this country are finding the labor movement to be that source, that collective action of people coming together and demanding a say in wages, hours, and benefits. And also, what's rising this is the same thing that grew the labor movement in the 60s and the 70s, the rise of the black middle class in this country. And during that great migration, when African Americans came from the South to the North to achieve a better life, they turned to the labor movement. And the labor movement, if history is correct, was not always welcoming. But people have found the labor movement to be a key component in making sure that the playing field is leveled in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of hiring, in terms of safe working conditions, and in terms of equality on the job. And I think that there's a resurgence, particularly amongst young people, where young people are coming into the workforce now. They're being faced with all kinds of threats like artificial intelligence and other things that really, really stand to jeopardize their standard of living. And they're turning to the labor movement as the source, as the movement that can help them navigate through these challenging times. So, we're growing, but the laws in this country, when it comes to organizing, is broken. The boss still has control over workers, and, we're working on passing the Protect Your Right to Organize, the PRO Act, to give workers a level playing field if they decide that they want to join a union without intimidation or threats from the employer. So as we continue to fight to improve this system, we see workers in non-conventional places, Gary, that we have seen in the past. Starbucks workers, gig workers, low-wage workers in this country is saying my shot at making good wages and receiving good benefits is through collective action. And that can only be found in the labor movement and through the art of collective bargaining.
You've been outspoken against voter suppression and outdated labor laws that have been rooted in racism here in the U.S. What reforms are most urgent at the state and federal level, in your opinion?
Well, at the state level, when it comes to voter suppression, we are seeing a rise of voting laws being suppressed now. We're seeing where voters are being required to produce certain state legislations that's taking place around this country, state laws maintaining erroneous voting ID laws. And we heard this very president talk about mail-in voting and how he's against being able to mail in ballots, which is a form of voter suppression.
Which he does, by the way.
Absolutely, which he does. That's right. And so we see this attempt to suppress the franchise once again, as we saw in the 60s and in the 50s, this suppression of people's rights to vote, and then in 1968, we passed the Voting Rights Act. And, the Voting Rights Act was supposed to eradicate all of those barriers when it comes to people being able to vote. But what we see is these schemes taking place in state after state. So we have to remain vigilant as a movement, not just the labor movement, but all citizens of goodwill who believe that voting is such a powerful, powerful tool for every American to level the playing field. We need everybody's voices to make sure that every American have the right to vote, and regardless of their race, their sex, their nationality. And the only way that we could do that is to make sure that the Voting Rights Act is respected. We have to fight for the reinstitution of pre-clearance of the Voting Rights Act that gives states unlimited power to change voting laws in states that will cause voter suppression for young people, for people of color. And, it's a never-ending struggle. It's a never-ending struggle in this country, but it's the most valuable asset that I think every American citizen has, and that is the right to vote for their elected representatives. It's a right that must be cherished, must be respected, and we have to push back at all attempts to suppress it.
Two more questions for you, and we'll let you get on to your day. Indiana has seen both union wins and setbacks. What's your message to Hoosier workers organizing in tough political climate like we have here in Indiana?
Well, first of all, I just want to give a shout out because the Indiana AFL-CIO is capably led by my steelworker brother, Brett Voorhees.
Mm-hmm. He's been a guest on my radio show before.
That's right. A strong trade unionist who followed in the footsteps of his father, who was a Central Labor Council president in Marion Township in the Indianapolis area. And then we have a strong person, the Secretary of Treasury, Sean Christ, I believe his name was.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we have good leadership in the state of Indiana when it comes to organized labor. But look, I go back to the Evan Bayard days. I go back to the days when the voices of all residents of the states were equally heard. There was legitimate debates on rights, on civil rights, on human rights, on labor rights in the state of Indiana. And then we went through a change. I recall the days of Mitch Daniels, and I recall the days, and now we have Braun. Yeah, and now we have Braun, who the president of the United States could pick up a phone and say, look, we need to change the congressional maps.
Yeah, they're going to do it.
Yeah, so, my message to the good people of the great state of Indiana is to be vigilant. Is to be vigilant and respect the progress that this state have made over the years. I mean, it was a struggle in the state of Indiana. History would tell you, that the state battled with, issues of racial discrimination and, battled with issues of voter intimidation throughout the years. And this great state overcame that. They overcame that through not just the labor movement, but powerful voices in the state who wanted to stand for what's right. And they elected through free and clear elections, representatives and governors like Evan Bayard and others who really, really spoke for the majority of the residents of Indiana. Indiana did it once, they could do it again. And I know a lot of people in the state of Indiana. I worked in the state of Indiana, and Indiana has the capability of really, really turning things around. And because there's some good people in the state from the north to the south, and we have to make sure that the people of Indiana is supported, not just by the labor movement, but by people of all walks of life in the state of Indiana. But the state has great capabilities, and I feel confident that Indiana's going to turn things around.
Well, it's almost like we gave you a list of our sponsors because the former governor, Evan Bayard, is a proud sponsor of our daily newsletter and this podcast. So he'll be glad to hear you say his name. One last question for you, and we'll let you run.
Okay.
What gives you hope right now? Why should listeners what should listeners be doing to build worker power in their communities? So, it can't all be doom and gloom right now. What gives you hope?
Well, what gives me hope is a lot of things that we're fighting for today is things that we litigated in the past. This whole emergence of, so-called white Christian fundamental nationalism
it's our lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
I mean, literally.
That's right. That's right. And I think that the majority of the American people, I know this for a fact, I feel this in my soul, that the majority of the American people is good, hardworking people, who believe that they are their brother's keeper, who has respect for their neighbors, people who want to care for one another, people who want to go to work every day, pay their taxes, be good citizens, have good school systems for their children. And we have to band together and fight this attack against imperialism. And what gives me hope really is young people. As I see more and more young people gravitating toward the labor movement and more young people running for political office today, it gives me hope that our democracy is worth saving. And there's good people in this country who is willing to put it all on the line to save this democracy that have worked for a couple of 100 years, this system that have really had its challenges, but we've overcome those challenges, and people who value living in the democracy for the people and by the people. And I feel very confident that our young people is not going to go backwards. They're going to move forward and move this country to its greatest potential.
Fred Redmond, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary.
It's my pleasure. This is Gary Snyder. He is Fred Redmond. This is the Snyder Report. We are out.